Anthony sent in a question. Why were the Eastern Catholic churches formed? I know some existed in the 1st century, but why did some form much later? Was it a retreat from Orthodoxy or some other cultural reason?
All right, well, the first thing you have to understand is that for the first 1,000 years of the church, there was Catholics were Orthodox, Orthodox were Catholics. There were a few periods of schism, but that was the deal. When the Monophysites in Syria and Egypt and all that broke with the body of the church, and as a result with the emperor in Byzantium, in Constantinople, the supporters of Catholic Orthodoxy, Orthodox Catholicism, were called Melkites, emperor's men, because they believed in the religion of the emperor, of the king, Melkite. Now, in 1054, you have the break between East and West, but it wasn't a complete break. And from time to time, as a whole, it was papered over for short periods. And then certain groups of Eastern Orthodox, and also beyond their borders, precisely the Syrian Monophysites and Egyptian Copts and guys like that, came to realize that they could not practice the entirety of the Catholic faith, of the Orthodox faith. Again, these two are synonymous. Catholic is universal, Orthodox is correct belief. Okay, no Orthodox believes that his religion is not Catholic. No Catholic believes his religion is unorthodox. And they're using the same words to describe the same thing. But from time to time, groups of Eastern Orthodox came back into union with the Holy See because they believed that that was the only way they could practice the fullness of the faith. Interestingly enough, today in Russia, the Russian Byzantine Catholic churches don't call themselves Russian Byzantine Catholic the way they do here. They call themselves Russian Orthodox in communion with the Holy See, in communion with Rome.
Wow.
And so, in a certain sense, the question is based upon a widespread misconception, which is that there's some sort of inherent or generic separation that is somehow has a legitimacy. As the current Patriarch of Moscow said when he was the Metropolitan of Smolensk, and in charge of the Russian Orthodox Church's relationship with other non-Orthodox churches, including our own, he said the union between East and West was like a divorce. And it will not be healed, no matter how many papers may be signed, it will not be healed until people see it as a sin and as a loss on both our parts. We've grown used to living apart. And it is a sin. It's a terrible thing, and like most schisms, you can come up with all sorts of nastiness on both sides. But remember that Christ calls upon us to forgive what's done to us. And this should be particularly true with people with whom we share the same religion. The Orthodox will have to learn to forgive the Fourth Crusade. We'll have to learn to forgive the slaughter of the Latins. And the Croats will have to learn to forgive the Serbs, and the Serbs the Croats. The Ukrainians and Russians each other, and both of them the Poles. And the Poles will have to forgive the Russians and the Ukrainians. Everybody will have to forgive the Slovaks. There's just so much amongst the Slovaks to forgive. No, seriously. What happens though is that we tend to treasure up these wrongs because they make us feel right. You did this to my people. Yeah, but what did your people do to mine? We could play that game forever. And of course, we know that's what Christ commands, because we'll be forgiven as we forgive. It would seem to me that the East, having gone through first the Turks and then the communists, and the West, having gone through the great modernist episode, which we haven't finished with quite yet, it would seem there'd be room on both sides for humility. It might even be said, since there's a joke that there are two connected jokes, that on the one hand, in the East, tradition ate up authority, and in the West, authority ate up tradition. contrariwise, that Catholics will tolerate any amount of heresy but no schism, and the Orthodox will tolerate any amount of schism but no heresy. If one looked at this, one could almost get the notion that maybe God knew about the temperaments of these two sides and intended each to act as a corrective on the excesses of the other, that they were supposed to operate in tandem, to breathe with both lungs, as St. John Paul II put it. And that maybe, just maybe, separate, they fall victim to their own worst excesses. But that couldn't be true, because if it were, it would imply that we weren't perfect. And we know that's not true. So, all I can tell you is that I do appreciate the question very much, but as I say, it's based upon a bit of a misconception. Primarily being that this schism is natural, or even in a sense good. It is a horrible sin. It was a sin when it started. It's a sin that it's continued, and we have been punished for it fairly continuously through our joint history. And yet somehow we never seem to catch up on it. You know, wow, these terrible things that are happening, they must be blessings for our goodness and that of our fathers. No, they're not.